Something that's a little strange about comics for me, and this is going to be in kind of an older person's view. This is something that I first came aware of in the late '80s and then through the '90s. I mean, it's been like 30 plus years. And one thing that's unique about comics is that these groups of people will kind of set themselves up to police and protect the industry. And some people call them gatekeepers, but I'm not. This isn't going in that direction. It's going more in this idea that individuals that kind of take it upon themselves to safeguard and protect and you know, help the industry along in their own way. And isn't that a good thing? I mean, maybe it's a good thing. Pride in your work, it should be, but it always goes weird consistently. It goes strange. Let's get into that. Hey everybody, this is Perch. If you've been, listening to YouTube channels and other things, then you've heard probably the this kind of idea of gatekeepers or a whisper network or that kind of stuff. But basically, people who in a private group, talk amongst themselves and kind of work to take steps to drive certain people out of the industry or alert when a publisher isn't paying on time or just various kind of things back and forth. And it may sound, if you've been listening to channels, it sounds like this is a new thing. In fact, several very very large channels talk about this as really kicking in like 2014. This is the first time it happened, and this is when things started to go wrong. But the reality is that's not even remotely the case. And this is one of those cases where you don't really have to bring receipts. You can Google pretty easily interviews from people. And one of the best ones, and again, you don't know where this is going, so don't jump to conclusions, but one of the best ones is Mark Waid, in the sense of Google some of his interviews from kind of the late 90s, 2000s, where he's talking about kind of as an editor, things he did and different groups either he belonged to or knew about or pushed people out. 2 points here. One, this idea of these kind of groups of people who've done this stuff is not a new phenomenon. It kind of has always existed in comics, or existed for a very long time. And number two, they're not always promoting kind of one ideology. People get kind of hung up in these groups or kind of one ideology or another. And sorry, the group itself may be, but there's been many groups who push for many different things. And in a lot of cases, as far as I can tell, in the 90s, when you saw some of these groups take place, it wasn't so much about ideology as it was about self-interest. And I think, frankly, it still is. I know people like to assign this kind of politics to things, but it feels to me a lot less like politics and a lot more like protecting themselves or protecting their own self-interest. In case in point, and by the way, this is not unlike if you look at some of the origins behind the image movement, when a bunch of creators kind of went off and did their own thing. There was some close collaboration between those guys at the beginning, and a few others who are kind of helping out. There were a lot of telephone calls, a lot of messages, and a lot of back and forth. There were, it's funny, you see there was AOL groups in the mid '90s. I mean, AOL. America, the thing that came with a disc to your house in the mail, and then you'd put it in and you'd get AOL. So easy your grandma could use it. These groups have existed for a long time. You had the Warren Ellis message boards, which of course got more prominence lately. You have the Brian Michael Bendis, network, and you've had this for a very long time. And I think one of the big mistakes people make is they quickly assign, these are left-leaning or, well, no, it says right-leaning, but they quickly assign politics to it. And I think that in many cases distracts and warps some of what's going on. And I think in some ways, given how polarized we are as a country, people at this point are happy to have political labels assigned to things because it gives those groups a lot of cover. The ones that you were seeing some news now lately with Alex DeCampi and Tamara Bonvillain and Magnus Passaggio and people like that contributing in a group. And people are very quick to immediately throw the liberal or Democrat label on it. And they're missing, in a lot of cases, the idea that there's some, collaboration taking place to kind of angle for different jobs or to attack people for very flimsy reasons. Some of the stuff that went on with Colin Bunn, for example, where people went after him because he was kind of following somebody who was following somebody who was following somebody in Comicsgate. And it's like, it's a flimsy connection. It's a really flimsy connection. I will give this to every single creator. When some random person says, hey, I liked your book, Liam Sharp, or whatever it happens to be, and then say Liam Sharp, this is a complete example, by the way, gives a like, that Liam Sharp is not signing up to whatever that person who said I like your book is all about. And in many cases, you've heard a lot about people, that the controversy has been around people on the left getting angry at people who are liking things that somebody's attached to the right says. But it goes the other way as well. Last week, somebody who in their profile on Twitter says they're a member of Antifa liked something or made some comment about Mike Barron positively, like, hey, this is a cool book. And they had Antifa in their profile, and there were some channels who were like, hey, you need to block that guy. Did you realize that? Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what this guy is doing, liking somebody from Antifa. It's just like, it's gross. Nobody has the time. I mean, this is the key. Nobody has the time to go through and vet all of that stuff. And none of us, I think, and hopefully, nobody wants a world where you have to subscribe 100% to somebody's ideology or do background checks on everybody in social media. It's a world of crazy. But the key is here that when people go and they try and kind of cancel someone or they try and attack somebody for who they know and who they like, it's not about politics. I know people argue fiercely with me on this, but it's a lot less about politics and a lot more about kind of getting advantage over each other, about promoting my work over this person's work. It's about power. And I think the sooner that people can kind of drop the charade that politics are involved. This is one of the biggest mistakes, I think, that a lot of fans who are frustrated by things going on in comics that they make is there's two mistakes they make. Number one is they immediately assign politics to it, which gives a nice, good punching bag distraction for people to go at, as opposed to the actual topics they're trying to talk about. And if you're trying to talk about how expensive comics are, injecting Trump into that is stupid. Trump has nothing to do with any of that on any front. The other mistake they make is that they'll trade kind of one group for another, rather than just, attack something that is wrong. They'll want to sign up with a group that is really just a different level of network. And I see all these people expressing surprise, by the way, that some of the indie comic work has transformed in where it seems like there's another whisper group of network on the independent anti-establishment side, and people are surprised, like, how could this have happened? Well, again, history tells us it happens all the time. It happens every time, and it's happened consistently in comics for the last 35 and probably longer years. The only weird thing about this, in my opinion, is why this happens so quickly at comic books and why it continues to exist in comic books. There are networks and friendships and professional associations in nearly everything. But comic books has been unique in that they get real teeth, they get power that other industries do not give them. Comic books allow problems to burn and fester and get much worse before they're addressed. And it's confusing for a business. Why? I mean, is it just laziness? Are people not paying attention to it? Do they not stamp this stuff out? When you get people who are doing kind of coordinated attacks, I mean, put it this way, at Microsoft, in various times in their history, groups would kind of get together to kind of, do politics and kind of position themselves. And anytime they got kind of any noise or any kind of tangible proof that this stuff was going on, the company would step in and smash that immediately. Would like people get fired and they'd get separated and they'd be assigned to different managers. It's like we're never going to let any of this take hold. But in comics, it's the weird part is a lot of these people write comics where you have like the Legion of Doom sitting in there in a little Legion of Doom swamp lair, and it feels like that. Like these, if you are in comics right now and you're in a private Facebook group or you're in a, you've got a Google Doc or some stuff that you pass around and it's private and you see things in there where you're talking about kind of outrage and anger, and if that's going on and you're involved in that, you have to know you're the villain. Whatever it is you're doing, whether you're owning the libs or whether you're trying to talk about problematic people, you are the villain. You have to know that look around you. It's like I don't know, there's an old joke we used to do at college where it's like if you find one day that you're staying in your fraternity or your apartments off campus, wherever you happen to be, and you find that you've got some weird sex dungeon in your fraternity, then you probably should be you should be self-aware enough to realize that things may have gone too far, that you probably are doing something that's going to wreck your life, and you shouldn't be hanging out. If you find yourself hanging out in a sex dungeon, something's wrong. A nicer way to put this is if you find yourself at the Waffle House at 2:30 in the morning, you have to question some of your life decisions. You shouldn't be there unless you work nights, and that makes sense. But otherwise, there's no reason for you to be at the Waffle House at 2:30 in the morning. And if you are, then something's gone terribly awry. And I've got to think that a lot of the creators, you find yourself in these weird groups where you're talking about problematic creators and what you're going to go do about it, and you find yourself writing things like, I'm going to do some things behind the scenes to take care of this. If you find yourself writing those words, you're the villain. At no point you should remove yourself from any illusion that you're doing something noble or you're doing something for the good of comics. No, you're the villain. It's like if you find yourself writing like an email to somebody, and in the email you write, I'm going to pick up some roofies because I've got a date later. You're the villain. There you go. You know it. It's right there in your words. You know you're the villain. So what are you doing? Stop, examine, retreat. You've made a horrible mistake. I made a terrible mistake. I don't know. So I 2 points here. One, these whisper networks are not new. They've existed for a long time, and they've existed consistently in comics, which is strange. Two, in almost all cases, these little networks are not empowering. It's not like we've got each other's backs or any of that. It's deceptive. It's often manipulative, and it's used to gain power over others in a negative way. Number three, I think the faster people kind of get out of assigning politics to all this stuff, the healthier everyone will be, because the politics are it's a distraction. It's a welcome distraction, because it means that 50% of the people will sign up to support you, even if they don't even pay attention to what you're doing, because you're just on their football team, so to speak. But by continuing to fight this thing over politics and ideology, you're missing the truly sinister stuff, and you're allowing it to just continue. That's my opinion anyway. What do you think? Leave a comment below, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. You can join my private Perch group on Facebook. Oh wait, I shouldn't say anything. Hey, thanks for listening.